Zuri stood in front of her bedroom mirror in Chicago, smoothing down the floral sundress she'd bought specifically for this trip. The soft blue fabric brought out her eyes and she'd spent an hour perfecting her makeup. Not too much for travel but enough to look radiant when they landed in Paris. "This is it," she whispered to her reflection, touching the delicate gold necklace Leo had given her last Christmas. "Tonight everything changes." Her suitcase lay open on the bed, carefully packed with clothes she'd saved for months to buy. The red dress for dinner at Le Jules Verne in the Eiffel Tower. The white sundress for strolling along the Seine. The black cocktail dress for what she was certain would be their engagement dinner. Zuri's phone buzzed with a text from her sister Carmen. "Have the best time. Can't wait to see engagement photos." She smiled, typing back, "Don't jinx it. But I have a really good feeling about this trip." The signs had all been there. Leo talking about their future more frequently. His mysterious phone calls that he claimed were work-related. The way he'd insisted on first-class tickets for this trip, saying she deserved to be pampered. Even his mother had started being nicer to Zuri lately, which was practically a miracle. 3 years together, and Zuri had never felt more secure in their relationship. Sure, Leo had been working late more often and yes, he'd seemed distracted during their last few dates. But she chalked it up to stress from planning something special. Men weren't good at keeping secrets, especially romantic ones. The Uber ride to LAX was perfect. Traffic was light, her flight was on time, and Leo had texted saying he was running late from a client dinner but would meet her at the gate. Everything was falling into place exactly as she dreamed. Zuri arrived at the airport 2 hours early, too excited to wait at home any longer. She checked in, sailed through security and found their gate with time to spare. The departure board showed Flight 447 to Paris, departing at 12:15 a.m. First-class seats 2A and 2B, side by side just like their future. She'd called Leo twice during the wait. Both times straight to voicemail. But that wasn't unusual. His phone died constantly and client dinners often ran late. She wasn't worried. Not yet. At 11:30, Zuri decided to freshen up in the bathroom. She wanted to look perfect when Leo arrived, wanted to see his face light up when he saw her. She touched up her lipstick, fixed her hair, and checked her phone one more time. That's when her world shattered. The message appeared at exactly 11:47 p.m. "Can't do this anymore. Sorry. Don't hate me." Zuri stared at the screen, certain she was misreading. This had to be meant for someone else. Leo he couldn't, end their relationship with a text message. Not tonight. Not when they were supposed to be boarding a plane to Paris in 28 minutes. She called him immediately. Voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. Her hands shaking, she typed back, "What do you mean? Where are you? We're supposed to be on a plane." The message showed as delivered but not read. Zuri sank against the bathroom wall, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Around her, women continued their normal routines. Washing hands, checking makeup, chatting about their travel plans. Life going on as usual while hers fell apart. She tried calling Carmen, but what could she say? That the man she'd been planning to marry had just dumped her via text message? That she was stranded at LAX at midnight with a suitcase full of romantic dreams and nowhere to go? Instead, Zuri forced herself to walk back to the gate, hoping against hope that this was some terrible misunderstanding. Maybe Leo's phone had been hacked. Maybe he was stuck in traffic and panicking. Maybe he'd sent that message to someone else entirely. But when she reached gate 15, Leo was nowhere to be seen. The boarding announcement crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're now beginning boarding for Flight 447 to Paris. First-class passengers, please approach the gate." Zuri stood frozen as other first-class passengers lined up around her. An elderly couple holding hands and discussing their anniversary celebration. A businessman checking his phone one last time before vacation. A young woman about Zuri's age, practically glowing with excitement as she texted someone about finally seeing Paris. Everyone had somewhere to go. Someone waiting for them. A reason to be on that plane. Zuri had nothing. She tried calling Leo one more time, her finger hovering over his contact. The phone rang once, twice, and then went straight to voicemail. He'd declined her call. The reality hit her so hard. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a technical glitch. Leo had deliberately ended their relationship tonight, knowing she was at the airport, knowing she'd be stranded, knowing she'd spent months planning and saving for this trip. Final boarding call for Flight 447 to Paris. All remaining passengers, please board immediately. Zuri watched through the gate window as the last passengers disappeared down the jetway. The gate agent began shutting down her station. In a few minutes, the plane would taxi away, carrying empty seats 2A and 2B toward a city Zuri would never see. She wandered through the terminal like a ghost, pulling her suitcase behind her. The late-night crowd was different from the daytime rush, red-eye business travelers, international passengers heading to exotic destinations, people with purpose and places to be. Zuri found herself at an empty gate across the terminal, Gate 23B, where a flight to Denver had departed hours earlier. She collapsed into one of the uncomfortable chairs and finally let herself cry. 3 years of her life, gone with 7 words. 3 years of believing Leo when he said he loved her, when he talked about their future, when he hinted about taking the next step. She'd been so certain he was going to propose in Paris. So certain that all the late nights at work, all the canceled dates, all the times he seemed distant were just stress from planning something special. Zuri pulled out her phone and scrolled through their text history. Just yesterday Leo had written, "Can't wait for our trip, babe. It's going to be amazing." 2 days ago, "You're going to love Paris. I have some surprises planned." "Excuse me, miss?" The voice was deep, warm, and tinged with what sounded like genuine concern. Zuri looked up through her tears to see a man standing a respectful distance away, his hands clasped behind his back as if he was trying not to appear threatening. What kind of person plans surprises while planning to break up with someone? What kind of person lets their girlfriend of 3 years board a plane alone to a foreign country? Her phone buzzed with a notification from the airline app. "We're sorry you missed flight 447 to Paris. Please contact customer service to reschedule." Reschedule. As if she had anywhere to reschedule to. As if she had anyone to reschedule with. Zuri turned off her phone and sat in the empty gate area, surrounded by the echoes of other people's journeys, wondering how she'd been so completely wrong about everything. Hey beautiful souls. Welcome back to Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narrative. I'm so glad you're here. This is your cozy corner for stories that touch your heart, make you swoon, and remind you that the best plot twists happen when you least expect them. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Now, let's get back to the story. "Excuse me, miss?" The voice was deep, warm, and tinged with what sounded like genuine concern. Zuri looked up through her tears to see a man standing a respectful distance away, his hands clasped behind his back as if he was trying not to appear threatening. He was tall, probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that looked perfectly styled despite the late hour. His charcoal suit was clearly expensive, tailored to fit his broad shoulders, and his shoes were the kind that cost more than Zuri's monthly rent. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, warm brown eyes that held real kindness, not the polite concern of someone just going through the motions. "I'm sorry to bother you," he continued, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. "But I couldn't help but notice you seem upset. Are you all right?" Zuri quickly wiped her eyes, probably smearing her carefully applied makeup. "I'm fine," she managed, her voice hoarse from crying. "Just waiting for someone." The man glanced around the empty gate area, then back at her with a gentle expression. "At Gate 23B? I hate to tell you this, but that flight to Denver left about 2 hours ago." Heat flooded Zuri's cheeks. Of course he'd noticed. She probably looked exactly like what she was. A woman who'd been abandoned and was trying very hard not to fall apart in public. "You're right," she said, surprising herself with her honesty. "The person I was waiting for decided not to show up. Ever again, apparently." Something shifted in the stranger's expression. Not pity, but understanding, as if he recognized the particular kind of pain that came from being let down by someone you trusted. "I'm sorry," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made Zuri's eyes water again. "That's really rough, especially at this time of night." Zuri let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, well, turns out 3 years doesn't mean as much to some people as it does to others." The man was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Can I sit down? I promise I'm not trying to bother you, but you look like you could use some company." Zuri studied his face, looking for any sign that this was some kind of pickup attempt or scam. Instead, she saw genuine concern and something that looked like loneliness, as if he understood what it felt like to be alone in a crowded place. "Okay," she said, gesturing to the chair beside her. He sat down, maintaining a respectful distance, and extended his hand. "I'm Daniel, by the way. Daniel Castillo. Zuri Williams." She shook his hand, noting that his grip was warm and steady. "And thank you for stopping. Most people would have just walked by." "Most people probably should," Daniel said with a rueful smile. "My assistant is always telling me I get too involved in other people's problems. But I've been where you are, not the same situation, but that feeling of having your world turned upside down when you least expect it." Zuri found herself curious despite her emotional exhaustion. What happened to you? Daniel was quiet for a moment, staring out at the empty terminal. About a year ago, I found out that someone I trusted, someone I thought I knew really well, had been lying to me about pretty much everything. It wasn't romantic, he added quickly, but it was someone I considered family. When the truth came out, it felt like everything I thought I knew about my life was built on quicksand. I'm sorry. That sounds awful. It was. But it also taught me something important about the difference between the people who are really there for you and the people who are just there for what you can give them. Daniel turned to look at her. Sometimes the worst betrayals teach us the most about what we actually deserve. Zuri felt something loosen in her chest, not quite relief but maybe the beginning of it. Is that supposed to make me feel better? Daniel laughed, a rich sound that seemed to fill the empty space around them. Probably not right now. Right now it probably just sounds like fortune cookie wisdom from a stranger in an airport. It kind of does, Zuri admitted, but she found herself almost smiling for the first time in hours. Fair enough. How about this instead? Whatever happened tonight, whoever decided they didn't deserve you, they're an idiot. And I say that as someone who's known you for exactly 5 minutes. You don't know anything about me. Maybe I'm terrible. Maybe I deserve this. Daniel's expression grew serious. Zuri, I've been sitting in this terminal for the last hour, and I've watched dozens of people walk by someone who was clearly in distress. You know how many stopped to check if you were okay? 0. But when I asked if you were all right, even though you were crying and probably wanted to be left alone, you were polite. You thanked me for stopping. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Zuri felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't entirely from sadness. You're very kind. But you don't have to sit here and try to make me feel better. I'm sure you have somewhere important to be. Actually, I don't. I'm supposed to be on a red-eye to New York in about 15 minutes, but honestly, I've been dreading it. Another business meeting, another room full of people who only care about what I can do for them. Daniel paused, seeming to make a decision. Which is why I'm going to make you an offer that's going to sound completely crazy. Zuri looked at him warily. What kind of offer? Come with me to New York. Zuri blinked, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? I'm serious. I have a private jet leaving in 15 minutes, there's plenty of room, and it seems like you could use a change of scenery. Plus, I could use the company of someone who seems like an actual human being instead of a networking opportunity. You're inviting a complete stranger onto your private jet. Not completely strange. We shook hands. We know each other's names. We've shared our deepest traumas. Daniel's eyes twinkled with humor. We're practically old friends. Zuri stared at him, certain he was joking. You're serious. Dead serious. Look, I know it sounds insane and I know you have no reason to trust me. But what's the alternative? Sitting in this airport all night feeling sorry for yourself? Going home to an empty apartment and spending the weekend wondering what you did wrong? The accuracy of his assessment made Zuri wince. That was exactly what she'd been planning to do. I don't even know you, she protested weakly. Yet, Daniel said, emphasizing the word. The key word there is yet. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? You end up in New York instead of crying in an airport terminal. Seems like an upgrade to me. Zuri looked around the empty gate area, then down at her phone, which still showed no new messages from Leo. She thought about her empty apartment in Chicago, about having to explain to everyone what had happened, about spending the next few days replaying every moment of her relationship and wondering where she'd gone wrong. Then she looked at Daniel, who was watching her with patient, kind eyes and offering her something she'd never had before, a completely spontaneous adventure with no strings attached. This is crazy, she said. The best decisions usually are, Daniel replied with a smile that made her stomach flutter despite everything that had happened tonight. Zuri stared at Daniel, her mind racing through a dozen different scenarios, most of them ending badly. You realize how this sounds, right? Mysterious stranger with a private jet invites heartbroken woman to fly across the country with him? This is literally how horror movies start. Daniel nodded seriously. You're absolutely right to be suspicious. If I were you, I'd be thinking the same thing. He pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. Here's my driver's license, my business card, and my LinkedIn profile. You can call my office, my assistant, even my mother if you want character references. Zuri looked at the information on his phone. Danielander Castillo, age 29, CEO of Castillo Holdings. His LinkedIn showed an impressive resume, Harvard MBA, board positions at several companies, and what looked like legitimate business credentials. Castillo Holdings, she read aloud. What kind of business? Real estate development, mostly. Some tech investments. A few restaurants. Daniel put his phone away. Nothing exciting, but it pays the bills and keeps me busy. And you just randomly invite strangers on business trips? Never. This is definitely a first for me. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, looking almost embarrassed. Look, I know this is weird. I know you have every reason to think I'm either crazy or dangerous or both. But I've been sitting in airports like this for the past 10 years, flying to meetings where everyone wants something from me, surrounded by people who only see dollar signs when they look at me. He paused, looking out at the empty terminal. And then I see you sitting here, clearly going through something terrible, and you're still polite to a stranger who interrupts your breakdown. You're real in a way that most people in my world aren't. Zuri studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. Instead, she saw something that looked like loneliness, the kind that came from being surrounded by people who wanted things from you rather than people who actually cared about you. What kind of business meeting? She asked. The kind where a bunch of investors sit around a conference table and argue about profit margins while pretending to care about the communities their developments affect. Daniel's voice carried a note of frustration. I've been trying to get them to approve funding for a community center in one of our new developments, and they keep shooting it down because it's not financially viable. That sounds frustrating. It is. Sometimes I think I'm in the wrong business entirely. Daniel looked at her curiously. What do you do? When you're not being abandoned at airports, I mean. I'm a pediatric nurse at Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago. Zuri felt a small spark of pride, the way she always did when talking about her work. I work in the oncology unit. Daniel's expression grew serious. That must be incredibly difficult. It is. But it's also the most rewarding thing I've ever done. Those kids are so brave, so full of life even when they're fighting for it. They remind me every day what really matters. Which is? Zuri thought about it. Being there for people when they need you most. Making someone feel less alone when they're scared. Fighting for things that matter, even when it's hard. Daniel was quiet for a moment. You know what? Maybe this business meeting isn't as important as I thought it was. What do you mean? I mean, talking to you for 5 minutes has reminded me of what I actually care about, and it's not sitting in a conference room arguing about profit margins. Daniel looked at her directly. Come with me to New York, Zuri. Help me remember what it feels like to see the city through someone else's eyes instead of just rushing from one meeting to another. Zuri's heart started beating faster. Daniel, you can't skip a business meeting because of me. Why not? It's my company. And honestly, maybe it's time I started making decisions based on what feels right instead of what's expected. Daniel leaned forward. When's the last time you did something completely spontaneous? Zuri tried to remember. I don't think I ever have. I'm not really a spontaneous person. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe being too careful is what got you into a relationship with someone who could walk away via text message. The observation stung because it was probably true. Zuri had always been the responsible one, the planner, the person who thought through every decision carefully. She'd chosen Leo partly because he seemed stable and reliable, qualities that had apparently been an illusion. I can't just fly to New York with someone I met 20 minutes ago, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Why not? It's just a few hours away, not another continent. You can be back in Chicago by tomorrow night if you want. Because it's crazy. Because I don't know you. Because I don't have the right clothes or enough money or... Zuri. Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. Those are all excuses. The real question is, do you want to go home to Chicago and spend the weekend feeling sorry for yourself, or do you want to do something that scares you a little bit? Zuri looked around the empty terminal, then down at her phone, which still showed no messages from Leo. She thought about her apartment, about having to call in sick to work, about explaining to everyone what had happened. She thought about the pitying looks and the well-meaning advice and the long, lonely weekend ahead of her. Then she thought about New York, a city she'd only visited once, briefly, for a nursing conference. The city that never slept, full of possibilities and energy and life. If I say yes, and I'm not saying I am, but if I did, what would happen? I mean, logistically? Daniel's face lit up. We fly to New York, we land in a few hours, and we figure it out from there. I know a hotel where we can get separate rooms, obviously. We can see the city, eat amazing food, and you can have a completely different weekend than the one you were dreading. And your business meeting? Can be rescheduled. Or maybe I'll just call in and tell them the community center is non-negotiable. Sometimes the best decisions are made when you're not sitting in a sterile conference room. And then what? And then whatever you want. You can fly back to Chicago tomorrow or stay longer, or go somewhere else entirely. No strings attached, no expectations. Just two people who needed a change of scenery. Zuri felt something stirring in her chest. Not quite excitement, but maybe the possibility of it. This is insane. Completely insane, Daniel agreed. But sometimes insane is exactly what we need. Zuri closed her eyes and tried to think rationally. Every logical part of her brain was screaming warnings. You don't know this man. You don't get on planes with strangers. You don't make life-changing decisions when you're emotional. But the other part of her brain, the part that was tired of being careful and responsible and predictable, whispered something different. What if this is exactly what you need? What if playing it safe is what got you here in the first place? Okay, she heard herself say. Okay. Okay, let's go to New York. Zuri opened her eyes and looked at Daniel, who was staring at her with something that looked like amazement. But I have conditions. Name them. Separate hotel rooms. Separate flights home. And if at any point I want to leave, you help me get home, no questions asked. Deal. Daniel stood up and offered her his hand. Ready for an adventure, Zuri Williams? Zuri looked at his outstretched hand, then at her suitcase packed with clothes she'd chosen for a romantic trip that was never going to happen. She thought about Leo, probably asleep in his bed without a care in the world, and about herself, sitting alone in an airport at midnight with nowhere to go. Then she thought about New York in the morning, about the city's energy and possibilities, and about the chance that maybe, just maybe, the worst night of her life was about to become the beginning of something better. Ready? She said, taking his hand and standing up. Let's go to New York. As they walked through the terminal toward his gate, Zuri felt her phone buzz with one more notification from the airline. Flight 447 to Paris has departed. Thank you for choosing us for your travel needs. She looked at the message, then at Daniel walking beside her, and realized that sometimes the best destinations were the ones you never planned to visit. The walk to Daniel's private jet felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life. Zuri had never seen anything like the sleek aircraft waiting on the tarmac, all gleaming white exterior and soft lighting spilling from the windows. A woman in a crisp uniform greeted them at the stairs. Good evening, Mr. Castillo. I'm Captain Maya Smith, and this is my co-pilot, James Brown. We'll be taking care of you tonight. Thank you, Captain. This is Zuri Williams. She'll be joining us for the flight to New York. If Captain Chin was surprised by the last-minute passenger change, she didn't show it. Welcome aboard, Ms. Williams. Flight time to New York will be approximately 5 hours. We should arrive around 6 a.m. local time. Zuri followed Daniel up the stairs, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and terror. The interior of the jet was even more impressive than the outside. Cream leather seats that looked more like living room furniture, polished wood tables, and soft lighting that made everything feel warm and intimate. This is incredible, Zuri breathed, settling into one of the plush seats. It's comfortable, Daniel said, taking the seat across from her. Though I have to admit, it's more fun when you have good company. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Zuri felt her phone buzz. A text from Carmen. How's Paris? I want details. Zuri stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How could she explain that she wasn't in Paris, but she was on a private jet with a stranger heading to New York? That she'd made the most impulsive decision of her life after the worst night of her life? Instead, she typed back, still traveling. We'll call you later. Second thoughts? Daniel asked, noticing her expression. More like reality setting in. I just realized I'm going to have to explain this to people when I get back. What's to explain? You went on a trip. With someone who isn't my boyfriend of 3 years. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Can I ask what happened? You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but it might help to talk about it. Zuri looked out the window as the plane lifted off, watching the lights of Los Angeles fall away beneath them. We were supposed to get engaged, she said finally. At least I thought we were. Leo had been dropping hints for months about our future, about taking the next step. This trip was supposed to be our anniversary celebration and, well, I thought it was going to be more than that. How long were you together? 3 years. We met at a hospital fundraiser. He's a pharmaceutical sales rep, so he was there for work. I was there because one of my patients' families had invited me. Zuri smiled sadly. He seemed so charming, so interested in what I did. He said he'd never met anyone who cared about helping people the way I did. What changed? Zuri thought about it. I don't know if anything changed or if I just started seeing things more clearly. The last few months he seemed distant. He was working late more often, canceling dates, always on his phone. But when I brought it up, he said he was just stressed about work, that things would get better after this trip. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. I thought maybe he was planning something special and that's why he was acting weird. Zuri laughed bitterly. Turns out he was planning something, just not what I expected. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Zuri, can I tell you something? And I promise I'm not just saying this to make you feel better. Okay. Anyone who could walk away from you via text message was never worthy of you in the first place. I've known you for less than 2 hours, and I can already see that you're kind, thoughtful, brave enough to take chances when it matters. If he couldn't see that, if he took that for granted, then he's an idiot. Zuri felt her eyes water. You don't know me well enough to say that. Don't I? You're a pediatric oncology nurse, which means you spend your days taking care of sick children and their terrified families. You were polite to a stranger who interrupted your breakdown. You agreed to fly to New York with someone you just met because you were brave enough to choose adventure over safety. Daniel's voice grew intense. Zuri, in my world, I'm surrounded by people who only care about what they can get from others. You're the first person I've met in years who seems to care more about giving than taking. What do you mean, your world? Daniel was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. My family has money. A lot of money. And when you grow up with that, you learn pretty quickly that most people see dollar signs when they look at you, not a person. Is that why you don't trust people? It's why I've learned to be careful about who I trust. But it's also why I can recognize genuine kindness when I see it. Daniel met her eyes. You didn't ask me what I do for a living or how much money I have, or what I could do for you. You just saw someone offering help and decided to trust them. That's rare. Zuri felt something shift in her chest. Not quite attraction but definitely interest. So what do you do when you're not rescuing heartbroken women from airports? Daniel laughed. Mostly I sit in boardrooms arguing with people about profit margins and community impact. It's not as exciting as it sounds. Community impact? My company develops residential and commercial properties. I've been trying to convince our investors to include more community resources. Parks, community centers, affordable housing units. They think I'm naive. Are you? Probably. But I'd rather be naive and try to make a difference than cynical and just focused on making money. Daniel paused. What about you? What made you want to work with sick children? Zuri thought about how to answer. When I was 12, my little brother was diagnosed with leukemia. He spent 2 years in and out of the hospital, and I watched how much the nurses meant to our family. They weren't just taking care of Danny, they were taking care of all of us. They made the scariest time of our lives bearable. Is he okay now? He's great. He's 22 in graduate school, completely healthy. But those 2 years taught me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just be there for someone when they're scared. Daniel was quiet for a moment. That's why you stopped for me tonight, isn't it? Not because you were looking for adventure, but because you saw someone who needed help. Zuri considered this. Maybe. I don't know. I just couldn't walk away from someone who looked as lost as I felt. And now I'm on a plane to New York with someone I met 3 hours ago, which is either the best decision I've ever made or the worst. What's your gut telling you? Zuri looked at Daniel, really looked at him. He had kind eyes and an easy smile, and he'd spent the last hour listening to her talk about her ex-boyfriend without seeming bored or impatient. He'd offered her an adventure when she needed one most, and he'd done it without expecting anything in return. My gut is telling me that maybe playing it safe all the time isn't actually safe at all, she said. Maybe it just keeps you stuck in situations that aren't good for you. Like staying with someone who takes you for granted? Like that, yeah. Zuri felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in months. Excitement about the future, about possibilities she hadn't considered. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you really invite me on this plane? And don't say it's just because I looked sad. There were probably a dozen sad people in that terminal tonight. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the stars visible through the plane's windows. Because 3 months ago I was in a really dark place. Not heartbreak, but something else that made me question everything I thought I knew about my life. And a stranger, someone who didn't owe me anything, stopped to help me when I needed it most. He paused, meeting her eyes. She showed me that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is offer someone a different path when their original one falls apart. And you think I need a different path? I think you deserve better than sitting in an empty airport gate crying over someone who was too much of a coward to break up with you in person. The words stung because they were true. Leo had been a coward. After 3 years together, she deserved at least a conversation, an explanation, something more than 7 words sent from the safety of his phone screen. You know what the worst part is? Zuri said. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed. All the times my friends said something seemed off, All the moments when I felt like he was pulling away and I just made excuses for him. That's not your fault, Zuri. That's what people do when they love someone, they give them the benefit of the doubt. Even when they don't deserve it? Especially then. It means you have a big heart. The problem isn't with you, it's with people who don't know what to do with that kind of love. Zuri felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't entirely from sadness. How do you know exactly what to say? I don't. I'm just telling you what I wish someone had told me when my world fell apart. Daniel smiled softly. Sometimes we need to hear from a stranger that we're worth more than we think we are. As the plane carried them east through the night sky, Zuri felt something she hadn't felt in months: hope. Not the desperate hope that things would go back to the way they were, but the bright, limitless hope that came with realizing your story was just beginning. Daniel? Yeah. Thank you. For stopping tonight. For caring. For seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes to something impossible, he said. Even if it scared you. Zuri looked out at the lights scattered below like fallen stars, then back at Daniel, who was watching her with patient, kind eyes. Maybe Leo had been right about one thing: this trip was definitely going to change everything. Just not the way any of them had expected. The plane touched down at Teterboro Airport with barely a bump, but Zuri felt like her stomach had dropped through the floor. As the engines wound down and the reality of what she'd done began to sink in, her hands started trembling. She was in New York. With a stranger. Having made the most impulsive decision of her entire life. You okay? Daniel asked, noticing her sudden pallor as they prepared to disembark. I think I'm going to be sick, Zuri whispered, gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles went white. Daniel immediately leaned forward, his voice gentle but concerned. Zuri, what's wrong? Talk to me. What's wrong? Zuri's voice pitched higher. What's wrong is that I just flew across the country with someone I met 6 hours ago. I don't do things like this, Daniel. I plan everything. I research hotels for weeks before booking them. I read restaurant reviews and make reservations, and I certainly don't get on planes with strangers. The panic was building in her chest now, making it hard to breathe. Oh God, what have I done? My sister is going to kill me. My boss is going to fire me. I was supposed to work Monday and I didn't even call in sick, and now I'm in New York with no plan and no. Zuri. Daniel's voice was calm but firm. Look at me. Breathe. She forced herself to meet his eyes, which were steady and reassuring despite her meltdown. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. Daniel waited until her breathing slowed slightly. Better? No, not better. This is insane, Daniel. I need to go home. Right now. Okay, Daniel said simply. If that's what you want, we'll turn around and fly back to Chicago. No questions asked. Zuri blinked, surprised by his immediate agreement. Really? Really? I told you, no strings attached. If you want to go home, we go home. Something about his calm acceptance made Zuri's panic recede slightly. You'd really do that? Just turn around? Zuri, the last thing I want is for you to feel trapped or pressured. If staying here doesn't feel right, then it's not right. Zuri closed her eyes and tried to think clearly. Yes, this was completely out of character for her. Yes, she was terrified. But was she terrified because this was actually dangerous or because it was different? Her phone buzzed and she looked down to see 3 missed calls from Carmen and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. Zuri, why aren't you answering? I tried calling the hotel in Paris and they said you never had a reservation. I'm seriously worried. Call me. If you don't respond in the next hour, I'm calling the police. Oh no, Zuri groaned. My sister thinks I've been kidnapped. Daniel glanced at the messages. You should call her. And tell her what? That I'm in New York with a man I just met? She'll think I've lost my mind. Have you? Zuri looked at him sharply, but saw he was smiling gently. Maybe. Probably. Sometimes losing your mind a little bit is exactly what you need. Before Zuri could respond, her phone rang. Carmen's name flashed on the screen. I have to take this, Zuri said, her stomach churning. Zuri. Carmen's voice was so loud Daniel could probably hear it from across the aisle. Where the hell are you? I've been calling for hours. I'm fine, Carmen. I'm safe. Safe where? I called every hotel in Paris and none of them have you registered. And what happened to Leo? His phone goes straight to voicemail. Zuri's heart sank. She'd been so caught up in her adventure with Daniel that she'd almost forgotten about the reason she was here in the first place. Leo isn't here, Carmen. What do you mean he's not there? Did his flight get delayed? No, Carmen, Leo broke up with me. Last night. Via text message. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Zuri thought the call had dropped. He did what? Carmen's voice was deadly. He sent me a text message at the airport saying he couldn't do this anymore. I was sitting there waiting to board our flight to Paris and he just ended it. That son of a... Carmen caught herself. Zuri, honey, I'm so sorry. But if Leo isn't there, then where are you? Please tell me you're not wandering around Paris alone. Zuri looked at Daniel, who was pretending to read something on his phone to give her privacy. I'm not in Paris. I'm in New York. New York? What are you doing in New York? I met someone at the airport. He was taking his private jet here for business, and when he heard what happened, he offered to bring me along. The silence this time was even longer. Zuri Elena Williams, Carmen said slowly, using Zuri's full name the way their mother used to when they were in trouble. Please tell me you did not get on a plane with a complete stranger. He's not a complete stranger anymore. We've been talking for hours. He's really nice, Carmen. He's kind and thoughtful and he could be a serial killer. Zuri, what were you thinking? I was thinking that my life just fell apart and someone offered me a chance to put it back together differently. By flying to New York with someone you don't know. Zuri felt tears starting again. I know how it sounds, okay. I know it's crazy. But Carmen, I've spent 3 years being careful and responsible and look where it got me. Maybe it's time to try something different. Carmen's voice softened slightly. Honey, I understand you're hurt and angry. But this isn't like you. You don't make impulsive decisions. You certainly don't travel with strangers. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe being so careful is exactly what got me into a relationship with someone who could walk away via text message. Daniel looked up from his phone, and Zuri saw something like admiration in his eyes. Look, Carmen said, I'm not saying you should come home right now, but I am saying you need to be smart about this. What's this guy's name? Where are you staying? I want details, Zuri. Real details. Zuri looked at Daniel, who nodded encouragingly. His name is Daniel Castillo. He owns a development company. And where? She realized she had no idea where they were staying. Daniel, where are we staying? The Plaza, Daniel said quietly. I can book separate rooms, obviously. The Plaza Hotel, Zuri repeated to Carmen. Separate rooms? Okay, that's something at least. It's a real hotel and an expensive one. Text me the address and his full name. And Zuri? I want you to check in with me every few hours, okay? I'm serious. Okay. And honey? I know you're hurting and I know Leo is a complete bastard for what he did. But please be careful. Promise me. I promise. After Zuri hung up, she sat in silence for a moment, staring at her phone. Regrets? Daniel asked gently. Terrified, Zuri admitted. But not regrets. Not yet, anyway. Your sister sounds like she cares about you. She does. She's just worried because this is completely unlike me. Zuri looked at Daniel. She's right, you know. I don't do things like this. Ever. What do you usually do when your life falls apart? Zuri thought about it. Analyze what went wrong. Make a plan to fix it. Work harder to be better. And how's that working out for you? The question hit harder than Zuri expected. Not great, apparently. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Zuri, can I tell you something? Sometimes the scariest thing you can do is exactly what you need to do. Growth happens outside your comfort zone, not inside it. Zuri looked out the plane window at the New York skyline in the distance, the city already bustling with early morning energy. Somewhere out there was a life she'd never imagined, possibilities she'd never considered, adventures she'd never thought she'd be brave enough to take. So what happens now? She asked. Now we get off this plane, we check into the hotel and we figure out what you want to do next. One step at a time. Zuri took a deep breath, feeling some of her panic subside. Okay. But Daniel? Yeah. If I have another panic attack, you're not allowed to judge me. Daniel smiled. Deal. And Zuri? For what it's worth, I think you're braver than you give yourself credit for. As they gathered their things and prepared to step into New York, Zuri felt her phone buzz with one more text from Carmen. Be safe. But also, have the adventure you deserve. Maybe Zuri thought she could do both. The Plaza Hotel was everything Zuri had seen in movies but never imagined she'd experience in person. The ornate lobby with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors made her feel like she'd stepped into a fairy tale, albeit one where she was wearing a wrinkled sundress and carrying luggage packed for a completely different trip. 2 rooms, please, Daniel said to the concierge, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone accustomed to luxury. Preferably on the same floor. Zuri watched the staff treat Daniel with the kind of deference reserved for very important guests, and she felt a flutter of anxiety about the world she'd stumbled into. When the concierge handed her a key card to a room that probably cost more per night than she made in a week, she had to resist the urge to ask if there was a cheaper option. "I'll pay you back," she whispered to Daniel as they walked toward the elevators. "Zuri, no. This is my idea, my invitation. You're my guest. But I can't let you." "You can and you will," Daniel said firmly but kindly. "Besides, what's the point of having money if you can't use it to help someone have a good time?" Zuri's room was on the 15th floor, with a view of Central Park that took her breath away. She'd never stayed anywhere this nice, never even imagined she would. The bathroom alone was bigger than her bedroom back in Chicago. She unpacked her suitcase, hanging up the dresses she'd chosen for romantic dinners in Paris and wondering if any of them would work for whatever New York had in store. Her phone rang as she was trying to decide between the red dress and the black one. "How are you feeling?" Daniel's voice was warm through the phone. "Like I'm in someone else's life," Zuri admitted. "This room is incredible, Daniel. I feel like I should be taking pictures to prove I was here." "So take pictures." "And Zuri? I was thinking, are you hungry? I know a place that makes the best pancakes in the city, and it's nothing fancy. Just good food and strong coffee." Zuri felt some of her anxiety ease. "That sounds perfect. I was worried you were going to suggest somewhere that required a dress code I don't have." "Never. I want to show you the New York I love, not the one that's trying to impress anyone." An hour later, Zuri found herself in a tiny diner in the village, sitting across from Daniel in a booth with cracked vinyl seats and mismatched coffee mugs. The pancakes were indeed incredible, fluffy and warm with real maple syrup, and the coffee was strong enough to wake the dead. "This is more like it," Zuri said, cutting into her stack of pancakes. "I was starting to feel like I was in a movie where I didn't know my lines." "The plaza can be overwhelming," Daniel agreed. "I wanted you to have a nice place to stay, but I don't want you to feel like you have to be someone you're not." "Is this where you usually eat when you're in New York?" Daniel laughed. "Actually, yes. My assistant is always trying to book me into these trendy places with celebrity chefs and 2-hour waits, but I'd rather come somewhere like this. The food is better and you can actually have a conversation without shouting over the noise." Zuri studied his face, looking for any sign that he was putting on an act for her benefit. Instead, she saw genuine contentment as he ate his eggs and read the sports section of a newspaper someone had left behind. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Shoot. Why aren't you married? I mean, you're successful, you're kind, you're..." She gestured vaguely at his face. "You know. And you seem to have your life together. What's the catch?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Honestly, I think I've been waiting for someone who sees me as more than just a bank account with legs. That can't be everyone. You'd be surprised. When you have money, it's hard to tell who likes you for you and who likes you for what you can provide. I've dated women who were more interested in being photographed at charity galas than actually talking to me. I've had relationships where I felt like I was being auditioned for the role of wealthy husband, rather than actually getting to know someone." Zuri felt a pang of sympathy. "That sounds lonely." "It is. But it's also taught me to value authenticity when I find it." Daniel met her eyes. "Like last night when you didn't ask me what I did for a living or how much money I had. You just saw someone offering help and decided to trust them. Maybe I'm just naive. Maybe you're just genuine. There's a difference." After breakfast, Daniel suggested they walk through Central Park. The morning was crisp and clear, with that particular energy that New York seemed to have, as if the city itself was alive and humming with possibility. "I've only been to New York once before," Zuri said as they strolled past the reservoir. "For a nursing conference. I spent the whole time in hotel conference rooms and barely saw the city." "What did you think of it?" "Overwhelming. Loud. Too many people, too much noise, too much everything." Zuri paused, looking around at the joggers and dog walkers and families enjoying the morning. "But this is different. It feels more human. The park does that. It's like the city's breathing space." They found a bench overlooking the water and sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the ducks and the early morning rowers. Zuri felt her phone buzz and saw a text from her supervisor at the hospital. "Hope you're having a wonderful time in Paris. See you Monday." The reminder of her real life sent a jolt of anxiety through her. "I should probably call in sick for Monday," she said. "I can't exactly explain that I'm in New York instead of Paris because I made an impulsive decision to trust a stranger." "What will you tell them?" "Food poisoning, maybe? Something that sounds believable but not too serious." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Zuri, can I ask you something? And you don't have to answer if you don't want to." Okay. Are you happy? I mean before last night, before everything with Leo, were you happy with your life? Zuri thought about it, really thought about it. I thought I was. I had a good job, a stable relationship, a nice apartment. Everything looked right on paper. But I can't remember the last time I felt excited about anything. The last time I did something just because I wanted to, not because it was responsible or practical or what I was supposed to do. Zuri looked at Daniel. Is that terrible? To realize that your life was fine but not alive? It's not terrible. It's honest. And it's fixable. How? By doing things like this. By saying yes to adventures even when they scare you. By trusting your instincts instead of just your plans. Zuri felt something shift in her chest, like a door opening that had been locked for years. Is that what you do? I'm trying to learn. It's harder than it sounds when you've spent your whole life being careful. They spent the rest of the morning wandering through the city. Daniel showed her the bookstore where he'd spent hours as a kid when his parents were shopping on Fifth Avenue. They stopped at a street vendor for hot dogs that were somehow better than any meal Zuri had eaten in a fancy restaurant. They browsed through a farmer's market where Daniel bought her a bouquet of sunflowers just because she'd stopped to admire them. You don't have to buy me things, Zuri protested as he handed her the flowers. I'm not buying you things because I have to. I'm buying them because I want to. Because you smiled when you saw them and I like seeing you smile. Zuri felt her cheeks warm. Daniel? What? This is really nice. All of it. But I don't want you to think that I'm here because of your money or what you can give me. I'm here because you were kind to me when I needed it most. Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. Zuri, I know exactly why you're here. And it has nothing to do with money and everything to do with the fact that you're brave enough to take a chance on something unknown. Standing there on a busy New York street, holding a bouquet of sunflowers and looking into the eyes of a man who'd appeared in her life like something out of a dream, Zuri felt something she hadn't felt in years. The possibility that her story was just beginning. If you've ever taken a chance that scared you but felt right, hit that like button. Sometimes the best adventures start with saying yes to something that doesn't make sense on paper. What's the most spontaneous thing you've ever done? Let me know in the comments. Zuri's phone rang just as they were walking back toward the hotel, both of them laughing about Daniel's story of getting lost in the subway on his first solo trip to the city. The caller ID made her stomach drop. Leo. She stared at the screen, her hand frozen halfway to answering. You don't have to take it, Daniel said gently, noticing her expression. I need to. Zuri swiped to answer. Hello, Leo. Zuri, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all morning. Leo's voice sounded strained, almost panicked. Where are you? Carmen said you never made it to Paris. I'm in New York. New York? What are you doing in New York? Zuri, we need to talk. I made a huge mistake last night. I was scared and I panicked, but I didn't mean what I said. I want to work this out. Zuri felt Daniel watching her, his expression carefully neutral. You want to work this out? After you broke up with me via text message and left me stranded at the airport. I know how it looks, but I can explain everything. I was having second thoughts about the proposal, not about you, about the timing. My boss has been talking about layoffs, and I thought maybe we should wait until things were more stable. But then I started overthinking everything and I got scared and... Wait. Zuri's voice was sharp. The proposal? I had the ring, Zuri. I was going to propose in Paris just like you wanted. But then I started worrying about money in the future and whether we were really ready and I freaked out. Zuri felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. You had a ring. I still have it. Zuri, please just come home and we can talk about this properly. We can still go to Paris. We can still have everything we planned. Zuri looked at Daniel, who had stepped a few feet away to give her privacy but was clearly concerned about her expression. Leo, you ended our relationship with a text message. You let me sit in that airport thinking I had wasted 3 years of my life. I know and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But people make mistakes when they're scared, right? We can get past this. We love each other. Do we? Zuri asked quietly. Because someone who loves me wouldn't have done what you did last night. Zuri, please. Don't throw away 3 years because I had one moment of panic. Come home and let's talk about this face to face. Zuri closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. 3 years. A ring. The life she'd planned and thought she wanted. Against one night with a stranger and the possibility of something completely unknown. I need time to think, she said finally. How much time? Zuri, I'm going crazy here. I love you. I want to marry you. Isn't that what you wanted? I thought it was. But Leo, what you did last night, it changed something. I can't just pretend it didn't happen. So what, you're going to stay in New York with some stranger instead of coming home to work things out with me? Zuri's eyes snapped open. How do you know I'm with someone? Carmen told me. Zuri, this is insane. You don't know this guy. He could be dangerous. You're not thinking clearly. Maybe I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. This isn't you, Zuri. You don't make impulsive decisions. You don't run off with strangers. You're responsible and practical and boring? Zuri's voice was getting louder, drawing looks from passers-by. And predictable? And so safe that you thought you could dump me via text and I'd just sit there and take it? That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. You thought I was so desperate to get married that I'd forgive anything. That I'd be so grateful for your proposal that I wouldn't care how badly you treated me to get there. Daniel appeared at her side, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his support. Zuri, you're being emotional. Just come home and we'll talk about this rationally. I am being rational, Leo. For the first time in 3 years, I'm thinking about what I actually want instead of what I'm supposed to want. And what you want is to throw away our entire relationship for some guy you just met? Zuri looked at Daniel, who was watching her with patient, understanding eyes. What I want is to be with someone who wouldn't abandon me at an airport. Someone who sees me as more than just a safe choice. Someone who makes me feel alive instead of just comfortable. Zuri, I have to go, Leo. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk. She hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking as she put her phone away. You okay? Daniel asked softly. He had a ring, Zuri said, her voice barely above a whisper. He was going to propose in Paris. He says he panicked and made a mistake. Daniel was quiet for a moment. What do you think? I think he's probably telling the truth. I think he did panic and I think he does want to marry me. Zuri looked up at Daniel. But I also think he's right about one thing. This isn't me. The old me would have been on the first flight back to Chicago to work things out with him. And the new you? Zuri thought about the last 24 hours. The devastation of being abandoned, the terror and excitement of getting on a plane with a stranger, the way Daniel had made her feel seen and valued and alive. She thought about Leo's voice on the phone, the same tone he used when he was trying to convince her to see a movie she didn't want to see or go to a restaurant she didn't like. The tone that said he knew what was best for her better than she did. The new me thinks that maybe being abandoned at an airport was the best thing that ever happened to me. Daniel smiled, but there was something cautious in his expression. Zuri, I don't want you to make any decisions based on me. This has to be about what you want, not about choosing between two men. I know. And that's what scares me. Zuri sat down on a nearby bench, suddenly feeling exhausted. For 3 years I thought I knew exactly what I wanted. Marriage, kids, a house in the suburbs, the whole traditional package. But being here with you, doing things I never thought I'd do, feeling things I never thought I'd feel, what if I was wrong about everything? Daniel sat down beside her. What if you were? Would that be so terrible? It would mean I wasted 3 years of my life. It would mean I don't know myself as well as I thought I did. Or it would mean you're growing. People change, Zuri. What you wanted at 25 might not be what you want at 28. That doesn't make you wrong, it makes you human. Zuri's phone buzzed with a text from Leo. I'm booking a flight to New York. We need to talk in person. She showed the message to Daniel, who frowned. Do you want to see him? I don't know. Part of me thinks I owe him that much. But part of me thinks that seeing him will just confuse everything. What does your gut tell you? Zuri closed her eyes and tried to listen to the voice inside her that had been quiet for so long. My gut tells me that I'm not ready to go back to my old life. Not yet. Then don't. You don't owe anyone anything, Zuri. Not Leo, not your family, not even me. You only owe yourself the chance to figure out what you really want. Zuri opened her eyes and looked at Daniel, this man who'd appeared in her life like a gift she hadn't known she needed. What if what I want is impossible? What if it's not? Zuri spent the next hour walking through Central Park alone, needing space to think without Daniel's presence influencing her decision. Her phone buzzed constantly, texts from Leo, calls from Carmen, even a message from her mother who'd apparently been brought into the drama. But Zuri ignored them all, focusing instead on the question that really mattered. What did she want? Not what she was supposed to want, not what would make other people happy, not what looked good on paper. What did Zuri Williams actually want for her life? When she finally returned to the hotel, she found Daniel in the lobby, reading a book and nursing a cup of coffee. He looked up when she approached, his expression carefully neutral. How are you feeling? He asked. Clearer, Zuri said, settling into the chair across from him. I need to tell you something. Daniel set down his book, giving her his full attention. I called Leo back, she said. I told him not to come to New York. I told him that what he did last night wasn't just a mistake, it was a revelation. It showed me that he sees me as someone who will always be there, no matter how badly he treats me. Someone safe and predictable who won't cause problems or make demands. And I realized that's exactly how I've been living my life. Safe and predictable. Never asking for what I really want because I was so afraid of being disappointed. Zuri met Daniel's eyes. But you know what? Being disappointed is better than never trying at all. Daniel leaned forward slightly. What are you saying, Zuri? I'm saying that 24 hours ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life was supposed to look like. And now I'm sitting in a hotel lobby in New York with a man I barely know, and I've never felt more like myself. Zuri took a deep breath. I'm saying that I don't want to go back to Chicago. Not yet. What do you want to do? Zuri felt a smile tugging at her lips. I want to have an adventure. I want to see what happens when I stop planning every detail and start trusting my instincts. I want to find out who I am when I'm not trying to be what everyone else expects. Daniel's face lit up. And how long do you want this adventure to last? I don't know. Maybe a week, maybe a month. Maybe until I figure out what comes next. Zuri paused. But Daniel, I need you to know that this isn't about choosing you over Leo. This is about choosing myself for the first time in my life. I understand. And Zuri? I think that's the bravest thing you could do. Zuri felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness she hadn't felt in years. There's something else I need to tell you. What's that? I'm falling for you. I know it's crazy and fast and completely illogical, but I can't pretend it's not happening. Zuri's cheeks flushed, but she forced herself to continue. You make me feel like the best version of myself. You see me in a way that no one else ever has. And I know we barely know each other, but... Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. Zuri, I've been falling for you since the moment you trusted me enough to get on that plane. You're kind and brave and real in a way that makes me want to be a better person. Really? Really? And I know this is all happening fast, but sometimes the best things do. Sometimes you meet someone and you just know that they're going to change your life. Zuri felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were happy tears. So what happens now? Now we take it one day at a time. We explore the city, we get to know each other, we see where this goes without putting pressure on it to be anything specific. And if it doesn't work out? Daniel squeezed her hand. Then at least we'll have given ourselves the chance to find out. But Zuri? I have a really good feeling about this. Zuri's phone rang, interrupting the moment. Carmen's name flashed on the screen. I should take this, Zuri said. She's probably worried sick. Zuri. Carmen's voice was frantic. I just talked to Leo. He said you broke up with him? What's going on? I'm figuring my life out, Zuri said calmly. And yes, Leo and I are over. For good this time. But he said he had a ring. He said he was going to propose. I know. But Carmen, he also abandoned me at an airport via text message. A ring doesn't erase that. Carmen was quiet for a moment. Are you sure about this? You've been together for 3 years. I'm sure. And Carmen? I'm staying in New York for a while. How long is a while? I don't know yet. I'm taking some time off work and I'm going to see what happens when I stop planning everything to death. This is so unlike you. Zuri looked at Daniel, who was watching her with encouraging eyes. Maybe that's exactly the point. Maybe the old me wasn't working out so well. And this guy, Daniel? What's his story? His story is that he's kind and thoughtful and he makes me laugh. His story is that he saw me at my lowest point and offered me hope instead of pity. His story is that he's helping me remember who I am underneath all the expectations and obligations. Carmen sighed. You sound different. Happier. I feel different. I feel like myself for the first time in years. Okay. But Zuri? Be careful. And call me every day. I mean it. I will. I love you, Carmen. I love you too. And Zuri? If this Daniel guy hurts you, I'm flying to New York to kick his ass. Zuri laughed. Noted. After she hung up, Daniel smiled at her. Your sister sounds fierce. She is. She's also going to want to meet you eventually. I'd like that. I want to meet the people who matter to you. Zuri felt her heart skip. Daniel, can I ask you something? Anything. What happens when this adventure ends? When I have to go back to real life? Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering. What if real life doesn't have to be the same as it was before? What if you could build a new real life, one that actually fits who you are? Is that what you did? I'm trying to. It's harder than it sounds, but it's worth it. Daniel paused. Zuri, I know this is all new and uncertain, but I want you to know that whatever happens between us, I'm committed to helping you figure out what you want. No pressure, no expectations. Just support. Zuri felt something bloom in her chest, warm and bright and full of possibility. You know what I want right now? What? I want to order room service and watch terrible movies and talk until sunrise. I want to pretend that tomorrow doesn't exist and just be here in this moment with you. Daniel's smile was radiant. That sounds perfect. As they made their way to the elevator, Zuri caught a glimpse of herself in the lobby mirror. She looked different, her eyes brighter, her posture straighter, her smile more genuine than it had been in years. She looked like someone who was finally awake after a long sleep. Daniel, she said as the elevator doors closed. Yeah. Thank you. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For offering me a different path when mine fell apart. For helping me remember that I'm braver than I thought I was. Daniel pulled her close and Zuri felt the rightness of it in her bones. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes to something impossible. As the elevator carried them upward, Zuri realized that sometimes the best love stories didn't start with love at first sight. Sometimes they started with kindness at first sight, with one person seeing another's pain and choosing to help. Sometimes they started with a stranger in an airport offering hope to someone who had forgotten how to hope for herself. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, that kindness grew into something beautiful and real and lasting. Zuri was ready to find out just how beautiful it could be. 6 months later, Zuri stood in the pediatric wing of the new community clinic in Brooklyn, watching Daniel read to a group of children in the bright, cheerful waiting room they designed together. The clinic was everything they dreamed it would be, a place where families could get quality healthcare regardless of their ability to pay, where children felt safe and welcomed instead of scared. Zuri had never gone back to Chicago. Instead, she'd found a position at Mount Sinai, working with underserved communities and discovering a passion for healthcare advocacy she never knew she had. Her apartment in Brooklyn was small but filled with light, and every morning she woke up excited about the day ahead. Ready to go home? Daniel asked, finishing the story and joining her by the window. Ready? Zuri said, taking his hand. As they walked out into the New York evening, Zuri thought about that night at LAX when her world had fallen apart. She'd thought it was an ending, but it had been the most important beginning of her life. Sometimes the worst moments really do lead to the best changes. Sometimes getting lost is the only way to find yourself. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to say yes to the impossible, you discover that the impossible was exactly what you needed all along. Have you ever had a moment that felt like an ending but turned out to be a beginning? Hit that like button if you believe in second chances and new adventures. Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear about the time you took a leap of faith and it changed everything. Remember, your story isn't over. Sometimes it's just getting started.